I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. Sharon, thanks for your comment. I'm hoping you can now hear me. So, whole purpose of today's session is it's about the strategy and tactics for how to deliver late running projects. In particular, I'm going to talk about the strategy we used to deliver a specific project. It was running 9 months late. It was a £30 million project, and how we got that project back on track in less than 90 days. So there are 3 questions you need to think about when you're delivering any change in any system. Number 1 is thinking about what to change. And I consider this the master skill, the ability to walk into a system, to know exactly what to change so that the speed of change is accelerated, because in essence, you know what buttons to press, you know what levers to pull in order to get the change. One of my biggest frustrations is being in a situation whereby I see, big consultancy firms come in, they've got 70, 80, 100 slides, and actually 90% of the slides do not relate at all to the things that are going to make any difference to the change itself. So what to change? Now, a big misconception about change in projects is that actually they run late because of 2 things. One, because things are very, very difficult and very complex. One of my friends is working in the defence sector right now, building things that take years and years. And what he says is actually the interesting thing is, irrespective of whether or not it's a big thing or a little thing, or it takes years or it's short, you get exactly the same issues. And I'm going to tell you what those issues are today. Or secondly, because of lack of resource. And actually what you find in most projects, and I'll explain this today, is that it's not lack of resource, it's the way that those resources are being used, and it's actually a lack of capacity because the utilization is so poor. So first thing is if you want to change anything, you have to learn how to study. Now, of course, I studied how to study under John Seddon for 20 odd years. And we learned how to study every form of system, certainly that I believe exists, from a kind of an industrial perspective, service systems, manufacturing systems. And what I found, and I wrote about this in my first book, is that really there are only 4 types of systems. Number 1 is a transactional system, like a contact center. Can we do things one and done? Second is a process environment where the thing takes a bit longer, but still one person doing it. Third is a project environment. The first time I saw this was in housing voids and housing associations, and there I recognized the characteristics where different people involved, sometimes it going back to the customer, sometimes it coming back to the supplier, but again, it typically taking a long time. And fourth is a person-centered system that you'd see in the NHS, mental health, that kind of thing. Now, again, the key is to know, well, where do I stick the lever in order to get the big change? So, for example, in a transactional system, it's how do we do more things one and done? In a process system, it's how do we remove waste in the process? In a person-centered system, it's how do we make sure that they have all the resources they need before you kind of send them off into the world. And what I'm going to do is talk today about the very specific levers you need to pull in order to get projects delivered faster. And as I say, I remember Seddon saying to me, you can't study projects, it's not a thing. And what I did over about 15 years was really built up this methodology for how to walk into a project, study it systemically, and at the end of it, be able to put my finger on exactly what the issues were. And I say I studied 55 projects. We did that in one, particular tranche over a 2-3 year period. We probably studied 80 to 90 projects now. We've studied that in multiple sectors, certainly over the past 3 years. And here's what I found. Here are the things that, again, rather than, the big consulting, 90-slide deck covering War and Peace. What I find with projects is it's very, very specific. You just tackle these things, you're going to get a better result. So the first thing I found was that if you think about scoping being two things, scoping is number one, either studying an operation or studying, for example, a market, an external environment, in order to be able to think about what is the product we're going to create, what's the product we're going to build. Often that takes way too long. You should be able to do that, in a few weeks. Secondly, what I find is that people often have not bad capability at studying operations, but they don't know how to do strategy, they don't know how to study markets. But then in terms of the scope for the project itself, the big issue is this. What happens is often the senior leaders hand it to the project manager. And the project manager then does the scoping, and that's typically done by some sort of scope document. Leaders are absent. And as such, what then happens is that scope document is sent around everyone. And of course, the minute you write something down and you don't have people in a room trying to understand it collectively, what happens is you get miscommunication, misunderstanding. And what we do with scoping is, because we know that, because things are typically sent round in documents and people initial them, they go, yeah, I've got that, meaning they haven't really read it, they haven't really understood it. You've got no clarity around the purpose of the project and unclear work packages. Now, when we do scoping, we do this. We're basically, what we do is we get the leaders in a room and we ask them all, so whoever the sponsors are, we get them in a room and we ask them to do this thing. We ask them to write down a little post-it notes. What's the purpose of the project? Who's the customer? What are the outcomes? What are the work packages? We give them 4 or 5 questions. We ask them to answer these individually, go to a whiteboard, put them on the whiteboard. So again, think about this as an intervention tactic. And we then ask the leaders to talk out what they think the thing is about. And what we've found over years of doing this particular tactic is time and time and time again, nobody agrees on what the purpose is, what the work packages are, often who the client is, what the thing is about to deliver. And that's a great starting point to then get the leaders working together to collectively do shaping and scoping. So number one, we need scoping done by the right people. Number two, we often use a little intervention tactic to make sure that they understand that actually what they're about to build is potentially the wrong thing. So on this late running project, that's the first thing we did. We stopped and we said, is everyone on the same page? They weren't. There was quite a lot of over scoping. There was a lot of things that had been missed out. So we redid the scope. Second, if you ask the question, what's the purpose of scoping? Well, the purpose of scoping is to support how to do planning better. Think about it. If you have a poor scope, you're going to be in a situation where the plan itself is going to be built badly. And here are the things that we've found time and time again people get wrong in planning. Number one, this is the big issue. Planning is rarely done collaboratively, meaning it's not done by the people who actually do the work. So if you are about to plan out a project, think about it. Work packages, definitions of done, sequencing of work, estimates. Do you not want that done by the developers, by the planners, by the project manager, by the testers, by the business architects, by the architects themselves? If I'm going to do a plan, I want that done by the people who actually do the work. Second big mistake is we plan projects 2 and 3 years out. And the due date then gets written in stone. And of course, actually, the minute you go 3 and 4 months out, you lose your ability to be accurate. So we certainly don't want to be, whilst you might have a long project, what we don't want to be doing is committing to things that are 12, 18, 24 months out, because in essence, you're guaranteed to be wrong. Next is poor sequencing. Often what you see, working on a big one at the moment for a client, where you see lots of activities done in parallel, and when you check for resource contention, what you find is that you've literally baked in multitasking. This group of resources is going to be working on this thing at the same time, these two things, so before you know it, multitasking is baked in. Again, in terms of work sizing, certainly in a portfolio, we find there's no common approaches. Some people, a lot of big waterfall projects are now using story points. Story points, if you look at the originator if you look at the inventor of story points, he came out last year and said, actually, story points is a silly idea. Most people use 1 point, 1 day, so what's the point? The other big issue with projects is because the project is deemed to be important, people build in masses of safety. And I'll show you how that manifests in execution as being a problem. So often what you get is you get a project that is 40 to 50% longer than it needs to be because of all the safety built in. Another big issue is planning at way too low a level. We're helping a client at the moment who's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little tasks planned. And of course, this was a big issue with this particular client. They built in too much safety, work sizing was all over the place, sequencing was wrong. But the big issue was what they'd done is they massively overplanned, hundreds of stories. So every time leaders came along and went, I don't agree with the scope, you need to change the scope, you had a situation where there was weeks and weeks of replanning. Due dates baked in stone. Due dates is one of the major reasons why projects run late, and I'll tell you why in execution, but you must not have interim milestones and you must not have interim due dates other than the end due date, and no clear definitions of done. Somebody picks up work and goes, I don't know what that is, jumps on to the next thing. So if the purpose of scoping is to support planning, the purpose of planning has only one purpose, to support execution. Thus, if your plan fails, all of these little checks, and as I say, when we're studying projects, we check all of these things. If it fails these, your execution is going to be done badly. As such, what you often have, and again, every project we see this, way too many open tasks, meaning that if you already have resource contention, if you already have a situation where people pick up a task and go, I don't know what this is, I don't recognize it, I don't know how to do it. What the brain does when it looks at a task, it goes, have I done it before? Is it going to take me a while? Is it going to be difficult? If the answer is yes, because there are other open tasks, people jump onto the other task. Before you know it, you've got multitasking, the single biggest cause of late running projects, both within projects and across a portfolio. So as I say, people pick up work not knowing what to do, and the brain says, this is going to be difficult. As such, you've got multitasking because of too many open tasks and poor definitions of done. The other thing that we see in execution, and I talked about it in terms of due dates, is due dates being baked in. So if you say, for example, this thing has to take, let's say 21 days, or it has to be done by, let's say 21st of December, you have a situation where if you have interim dates, and if you think about targets and how people behave towards targets, you have a situation whereby you get two things. You have this thing called student syndrome, which is, if you think about when you went to university or college and somebody said, hey, you've got this essay to do, and many of us went home that night and immediately started doing the essay. Some of us did, but many of us went, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it the next day, I've got plenty of time. Before we know it, we're doing that essay the night before, looking for excuses as to how we can get an extension. Second thing you've got is Parkinson's law with due dates, which is you have a situation whereby work expands to fit the time. Now, this especially happens in tasks. If you give people a task with a number of days on it, they go, well, I could do it in 2, but I've got 5, so I'm going to take that 5. So in execution, we want to make sure that rule number 1 is we're limiting the amount of open tasks because we want to reduce multitasking. We want to make sure that people have really good definitions of done, so they pick it up and they know what to do. And we also want to make sure that because they've only got one task to work on, if they get stuck, if they get blocked, then they have to ask for support. They don't just put that down and jump onto the next task. Then the next thing that goes wrong is measurement. And what you'll see in many of the projects, possibly in your organization, is 2 methods of measuring projects. Number 1 is an update pack. And that update is just a fortnightly thing where the project managers goes around and says, hey, is everyone on track? And of course, the answer is, yes, I'm on track until the very last minute. And that's what most leaders complain of. I don't know I'm going to be late until I'm late. Or it's this one, which is, what is your percentage complete? And of course, as we all know, you can be in a situation in life whereby you're 70, 80, 90% complete on a project, but because of things like due dates and because of trying to squeeze, Scrum is a big thing that causes this, where people put the easy work into the sprint, the difficult work gets left, the 10, 20% that's left on a project can actually be the thing that's going to take the longest. So simply saying, are you on track? What's your percentage complete? As a way of measuring is a very, very poor method that not only gives or doesn't give leaders information on what's running late and why and how to recover it, but actually it doesn't tell them until it's too late. The final big thing about what to change is leadership, in terms of leaders want due dates. Without understanding the psychology of a due date, is it will make things run longer because of student syndrome and Parkinson's law. They also want to put more projects into the mix because their view is the more we start, the more we finish. In a portfolio, what you often see is them having way too many priority rules. And I often use the air traffic control analogy. If you're trying to land planes, you really only want 2 priority rules. First come, first served, or the second one, which is if there's an emergency, someone can go in front. Anything else, you have a situation whereby you're constantly changing the rules of the game in terms of, oh, we're going to do this project, now we're going to freeze this one, we're going to do this one. And like planes, what you have is everything circling, nothing landing. And the final thing in terms of leadership is not unblocking, meaning somebody gets blocked, there is no process for unblocking that piece of work. They put the piece of work down, they jump onto something else, and before we know it, we have designed in multitasking. So, second thing is, if those are the things to change, well, what do we change to? So as I say, successful scoping. We get the leaders in a room. We get them to answer these questions individually. By the way, if you want a copy of the slides, DM me, I'll get them over to you. We get them to answer these questions individually. They talk out their answers. Having done that, what they soon find is that there's a big lack of alignment around the scope of the project. From that basis, we can then start from there and start to get alignment so that the plan is based on an aligned, clear scope. In terms of planning, we want a cross-functional team. The leader walks through the scope document, and we use these rules. We plan out the big chunks first. You shouldn't have any more than 20 to 30 chunks in a big project. We try and size them at 20 days. The reason being is because actually, if you think about it, we kind of work as humans in 20-day chunks in terms of our working month. Each chunk is captured in a box, and we make the outcomes clear by saying to people, what is it we will physically see? So if you're talking to testers, well, you'll see a test report. If you were talking about, a cloud environment, well, you'll physically see a note from a server that's maybe been stood up in, Arizona somewhere saying your server is now stood up and this is the amount of storage you now have. We want to know what we'll physically see when the thing is done. For example, you know, I'm massively in favor of using wireframes and making sure that the wireframes are attached to the chunks so that when a developer goes to build something, they not only have a great description, they have a visual view as to what they need to build. So few people utilize wireframes. The team then sequence the chunks and we make sure that we have no resource contention, we have hard dependencies, and we put in rough estimates around the time. Now, why rough estimates? We don't want hard defined due dates because we want to avoid Parkinson's law and student syndrome, meaning that if you have a hard due date, the best that will ever happen is you'll finish on time. With a rough estimate, we want to have the benefit of sometimes finishing early so that we will sometimes finish early, sometimes finish on time, sometimes finish late. But the aggregation means that the project overall has a better chance of finishing early. In execution, we want to take each big chunk and we sequence out the tasks. And we have those tasks typically 2 to 5 days. We release one task at a time. You can only see the task that you're working on, and meaning one task only is visual in Jira. So the first thing we're doing is we're massively limiting WIP. We do this in a project portfolio as well, where actually we'll start by freezing 50% of the portfolio so that you cannot go and work on other projects. Now, with measurement, we do this daily. And the first thing we do is we use our safety strategically. So we know that safety has been built into a project. We've got a 90-day project. We'll take about 30% of that and we'll put that into the end of the project. What we'll then do is with the task, we'll say to people, what is your remaining duration of your task? If you had a 5-day task, and let's say it now becomes a 10-day task, because they're so close to the duration, they can estimate accurately. That 5 days tells us, hey, you've consumed safety even after day one. So every single day we issue a fever chart, and that fever chart lets you know whether you're in the yellow or the red, which is you're consuming safety way too fast. When we put this system in place, what we find with the majority of clients is if we start with them with the project, they'll finish in the green, and that demonstrates that actually they've built in way too much safety. With this client, we changed the scope, we got the plan right, we broke down just the first few chunks, we moved away from hundreds of tasks open to a few tasks open. And at first the developer said, well, you're telling us we have to work on this thing. That's right, you have to work on this task because it's the next task in the order. The leaders loved this specifically because what we were able to say to them was not just, are you starting to run late, but the exact reasons for running late. Suddenly what leaders said is, I now have a purpose. I now know exactly what my role is, and I now know exactly how to add value to the team. And this team became known as the most reliable team in the organization. What the leader said to me recently is, if the boss wants something delivered, they come to my team, because they know that in our team, they don't quite understand it, but they know that we deliver to our commitments every single time. They said, why wouldn't we? Our scope's right, our plan's right, our ways of working and execution are right. We have a measurement system that tells us if we're going to run late, exactly why we're going to be late and exactly what we need to do to recover to get back on track. I would say 100% of projects that we go into don't have any of these things or fail on all of these things. And as I say, the first thing we do is we study and we go through our little checklist to say, how many of the boxes do you currently tick that you're doing it the right way? The majority, the answer is very, very rarely are they doing any of those things. But you know, that's a good thing, because now they know, and because we know the exact levers to pull, we can change things really fast. We also do work with the leaders to help them understand the folly in long-term planning. We teach them to move away from due dates. We teach them about rough estimating. We teach them about the downside of targets. We help them understand that you cannot have multiple priority rules and you can't be consistently pushing new work into the system. And we also teach them about their role, which is now unblocking and having an unblocking system in the project, and also process confirmation, checking that people are following the rules. And process confirmation, by the way, is a system we developed. We kind of mimicked what Toyota do, and a lot of leaders criticize it, and a lot of other consultancy firms. You go, well, it's a policing system. It's a coaching system. It's a system for leaders to turn up, understand if the ways of working are being followed, and if they're not, ask 3 questions. Number 1, have I not given these people clarity? Have I not given my team clarity? Have I not given them skills, or is the system not allowing them to work this way? And only after that do they then say, is it potentially about the people? So it's a really incredible way of leaders adding value to ways of working at the front line. So again, think about capacity. Capacity is not lost due to complexity or not having enough people. Capacity is lost because scoping is unclear. The project starts, it has to be re-scoped. Planning is done badly because it designs in multitasking and due dates and unclear and too big work packages. Execution, because again, you have a lack of clarity in the task. You have too many tasks being released. Thus, you are designing in multitasking at the task level, things not being unblocked is another one. And measurement, which is meaning that people can go 1 and 2 weeks before actually they have a situation that they're told that something is running late and they can act on it that day, as opposed to 2 weeks later. And leadership thinking around things like due dates, priority rules, and putting too much work into the mix. Now again, key is study. Key is study. So once you know to look for these things, you can go into a project. The last one we did it in about 3 hours. We were able to say, here's your issues. We redid the scope, we redid the plan, and actually within about 9 days, we had them executing in a completely new way. And in the case with this client, excuse me, by doing these things, the project was recovered. We started in the March. It should have been delivered originally on the 29th of June, and I think we delivered it on the 28th of June, saving the client millions in terms of resource that we were about to use, and also market reputation, because they'd committed to the market that they were going to deliver this thing, which they then did. So, you've got 3 options. Option number 1, keep doing what you've always done, the old cliche, and hope for the best. What I can tell you of all our research, the things that I've talked about, I'd put my mortgage on the fact that if you've got late running projects, those are the issues. Second is, you got my LinkedIn page, there's a whole masterclass series in my bio. You can get all the information. There's about 11 hours of information there. You can watch it all for free. Or it says 2-day project audit workshop. Actually, often we can do this in a day, and what we'll do is we'll turn up on site, we'll work with the leader, and we'll show the leader exactly what's going wrong in the project. We'll help them build a plan for what to change to, and we'll even help them work out how to cause the change. So we can do it in about 8 hours. It's a done with you workshop, not a done for you workshop. So the leader must be there. We look at every aspect of the ways of working, the scoping, the planning, the execution, and the measurement. And as I say, the last one we did in about 3 hours, but we can do this really, really fast now. You get a complete checklist for how to do scoping. We'll teach you how to do that. We build a process map of the planning process. We show you where you're going wrong in execution. We teach you all about measurement, and we understand the flaws in your measurement system. And we give you a kind of job role playbook as to what are the exact roles for your leaders. And as I say, we do all of this in a day. It's delivered big late running projects for big banks such as Lloyd's. We implemented a national digital change system in the criminal justice system. Millions in homelessness over the past 2 years for a massive council in Scotland. And typically in housing, if you're in housing and you're on the call, it will have huge reductions in housing voids. And of course, the big thing we do mostly these days is software development. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're doing Agile, Scrum, Waterfall, whatever you want to call it, because actually the ways of working, the things that make the projects run late are exactly the same. Somebody said to me the other day, well, this only works for this or it only works for that. The ways of working, the problems are exactly the same. So 15 years ago, I paid about £15,000 to learn how to do this, and it took me a long time to learn how to do this. So it's taken years for us to develop our methodology for how to study projects. I've probably invested 5 times the amount of my original 15k in how to do this research. So even if I was asking for, we generally charge about 8 to 10k for our scoping workshop, and then of course the client can then go on and do whatever they want. They can hire us for the next piece, or they can just take the information. But if you're in the group, and I hope you are, and obviously you're here today, if you've found this of value and you want us to turn up, we'll do it for you in a day. And if the team that's available that day to work with us gives us a little testimonial, and the decision maker who may want to hire us is present, we'll do the audit for you for free. Now, here's the catch. There is only one place, so it's kind of first come, first serve. We do 1 audit per month, free, to help clients out as a way of kind of us generating business. But generally, we charge about 10k for these audits. If you do want the free one, then you have to DM me. So you have to connect me. You'll have to DM with me, and we'll check that you fit the criteria, and we'll do that free audit for you. If you also would rather pay, then that is great news. Delighted to take your money and make sure that you get massive value for that. If you're not ready for the audit, and what you'd want to do right now is learn more about it, go to my profile. There's a link there. There's a whole link tree in there, or go to fragilebook.co.uk, and that'll get you a free download of the book. And actually, there's a little kind of automated sequence there that you'll get some emails, and those emails will give you the offer of the audit. But I think if you go into that one, potentially that's the paid audit. So if you want to take advantage of the free one, you have to get a hold of me pretty soon. Last time we had about 7 or 8 requests, and of course I could only fulfill one of those requests for the month. So I hope that has given you value. I hope that you've kind of went, okay, a lot of that stuff is very, very different to what I've ever heard about the causes of late running projects. And look, if you've got a question, DM me or email me, and or leave a comment, and I'll get back to you. Likewise, if you want the book, go straight to fragile.co.uk. If you want the audit, you better get in pretty fast. This is all being recorded. We will drop this into the group. So if you're in the group and you haven't seen it, or you want to pass this on to somebody, then it will be available for you to have a look at again, or pass on to a friend and colleague. And if you want us to do this presentation at your management team, again, DM me, and I'll be happy to chat about how we go about doing that. So until then, thanks very much. I hope this has been valuable for you, and hopefully we'll meet again or we'll talk again soon. Thank you.